Yeah, so let's talk about leadership for a minute. I come up from the school that said leadership is the process of influencing others to
Mm-hmm.
accomplish a task by providing purpose, direction, and motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And those three elements are the things that any leadership program should have. Why are you doing this? How do I get you to do this? And what direction do we need to go to do this? You do not have to have a master's degree in organizational development to understand those three fundamentals. Many great leaders just know it in their bones.
You're listening to Lead with Dr. Ralph Hughes, leadership thought leader, author, and keynote speaker.
Hello, everyone. We're thrilled to have you join us for another insightful episode. This podcast is dedicated to bringing issues to light that hinder people in leadership positions and offers best practices from organizational leaders who got it right and industry experts who can share their perspectives. Today, we talk about leading in the security industry. Guiding us through this discussion and providing invaluable insight, I am honored to introduce our esteemed guest. Our guest expert is a seasoned security executive with over 25 years of private sector experience designing, developing, and implementing comprehensive security investigations and intelligence strategies across diverse business climates and organizational cultures. He has led global security teams to create successful solutions in areas such as executive protection and travel safety, special events security, business continuity, emergency response, crisis management, and security systems. He is also an accomplished speaker and published author, having presented on protective intelligence surveillance detection at the ASIS, which is an acronym for the American Society for Industrial Security, at their international conference in Atlanta, Georgia in 2008, and on transnational criminal organization activity for the U.S. Department of State consulate in Monterrey, Mexico in 2011. He has also contributed articles to Security Management magazine. Our guest is a certified protection professional. He received this designation through ASIS International and has held senior security roles in organizations including Cisco, Hewlett Packard, Life Technologies, Callaway Golf, Samsung, Broadcom, and most recently, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation as the Global Director of Safety and Security. Prior to his civilian career, he was a distinguished military graduate from Central Michigan University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in history and spent 9 years serving in the U.S. Army at various assignments worldwide. Please help me welcome Mr. R.C. Miles. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thanks, Ralph. It's a pleasure.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here. I know I went over your bio, but in your own words, talk to us a little bit about who is R.C. Miles. Who is R.C. Miles?
Good question. When I think of myself, like many men, I think of myself as a father first. I have been doing the security industry since I left the U.S. Army. I came into it by accident, actually. I had a hobby of training dogs, and that migrated me into being a security professional. As a person, I have been trained and have practiced leadership for pretty much my entire career. So I'm a firm believer of the effectiveness in leadership and how they can make changes and direct organizations to achieve success. I like to think of myself as a person who likes to learn. I'm a pretty voracious reader. I read a lot, actually. And I'm also an avid believer that the more you learn, the more you stay alive. I think the brain needs to be fed regularly with new knowledge. I think it keeps our brains sharp. And on a personal note, I've been practicing martial arts for, over 30 years now, and it's a big part of my life, and I enjoy doing it. So I don't know if that helps
Nice.
answer your question or not, but that's who I am.
Nice. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for that excellent response. So let me entertain you a little bit. What style of martial arts do you train in?
I've been training in Aikido for about, since 98. It was hard to train in martial arts in the military because you keep bouncing around. But once I was out of the military, I found Aikido to be the best martial art for me. I've been doing it ever since.
Okay, excellent. And for people who are not aware of Aikido, tell us a little bit about Aikido.
Aikido, if translated in English, would be the way of harmony. It's a martial art where you don't actually clash with your opponent. You blend with their energy and neutralize them. It's a way of controlling violence without being excessively violent. I like to say to people, it's kind of like a dimmer switch on a light. You can turn it up as bright or as low as you need to. It's not an easy martial art to learn, and some people challenge its effectiveness, although I personally know that it works quite well. And it's not about conflict; it's about neutralizing the conflict. It accepts the fact that conflict is a part of life. So I guess it's the easiest way to describe it.
And I appreciate that. That's excellent. And as you were speaking, I was thinking about Aikido in leadership terms. I was thinking about John Maxwell. Show them the way, lead the way.
That's true. Actually, that is a key component um, to what I believe to be an effective part of dealing with people. I have not always practiced this, but there's a great book called like Aikido in Everyday Life, and it talks about
Hmm.
dealing with conflict. If you're a leader, you're going to deal with conflict. People
Hmm.
are supposed to disagree. If I put four leaders in a room, I'm going to get like 12 opinions on what we should do.
Hmm.
Okay, that's just the way it is. That people all have their opinions. They all value their opinions, and in different organizations, you have different levels of willingness to be aggressive and advocating for those opinions. You
Hmm.
cannot stop conflict. The question is, how can you deal with conflict without being overly confrontational?
Right, right. And how you navigate those conflicts and lead those talks. And that's very important as well.
I agree.
Yeah. That's a great segue to a question I have. What are some of the biggest issues you see facing the security industry today?
Well, there are two major issues right now that are just kind of dominating the discussion, and I tend to agree with them. The first one would be the effect of the assassination of the murder of the head of the United Healthcare on the
Hmm.
streets of New York.
Hmm.
That has had a dramatic impact on security. A lot of executives everybody was shocked, but a lot of executives were stunned to see that people would be willing to get that violent to redress their grievances. The secondary effect, which is probably, in my opinion, the bigger one, is the surprising support the alleged shooter has received in our society. He has become almost an icon for some people against health insurance industry. They hold him up as a hero. You see Luigi statues. You see Luigi is almost in the Madonna style getup. I've seen pictures with him on T-shirts. That was a really big surprise because it conveyed that there's a population out there that sees violence as a solution for something that should never have occurred. The other element that's really driving security challenges is the move away from a global based business or business operations model to more that are more regionalized, as you see the nationalization and the restoration of national boundaries with regards to international business. For those of us who came out of the Cold War and the period since then, we've all operated under the globalization model where we try to have standards that apply all the way across the board. And there's an understanding between countries and nations as to how they should work, and that has driven businesses, which has led to enormous wealth, certainly here in the United States. But as you see more and more nationalist developments, that is a problem. Security is a small field. There aren't that many security professionals in this industry, so we rely heavily on our ability to work, transnationally and across organizations. We typically view our business not as a financial advantage to the organization. We're trying to keep people safe and protect the product and the property. That's the general rule for security. So that allows us to
Right.
share across a broad platform. That is not the case that's occurring now with this increased focus on nationalization and reshoring and bringing stuff back to the United States and in various countries. That's a challenge.
Mm. Yeah, I can see that being a huge challenge, especially because you mentioned there are not a lot of security professionals worldwide, statistically, even
No,
more so individuals such as yourself, who is
mm-hmm.
a global threat analyst, as well as a personal security professional, whereas executive protection is another level of security, and you don't have a lot of executive protection specialists, if you will, around the world as well. And I think that's what you were alluding to. So, what are some
That
of
is
the
a
ways security?
very small
Hmm.
field, Ralph. Very small.
Hmm.
And it should be. You typically don't need, most business professionals to date have not needed a large detail
Right,
to protect them. So that murder in particular is causing a pretty big shakeup.
right, and probably an increase in executive protection as well. But the lack of proper training, guidance, the right people to be on board, the right background, the right fit for these organizations as well as the right mindset.
You're right. And the challenge here is that executives don't know what they want. So after this, of course, everybody wanted to be, a lot of folks want to be surrounded by a fairly heavy detail armored vehicles. You're seeing a lot of that kind of demand and discussion. The easiest way to know how important it is that if you follow the advertisements for postings of jobs, all of a sudden, within a month, you start seeing all these positions being posted for executive protection management and leadership. Every organization wanted somebody on board who knew how to do that. And I would tell you, if you are a security leader for business, you should be having conversations about the expectations that they
Hmm.
have around this. Most people, when they think of executive protection, they tend to think of what you see the president of the United States have. Well, I've actually had the good fortune to work with a presidential detail as a private
Hmm.
sector individual once, and I'm here to tell you there are very few organizations that are going to invest that kind of wealth and resources into executive protection. In fact, their board of directors would probably say, "Why? Why are
Hmm.
we putting?" It's just an enormous. It's a very large amount of money. When you think about the air transportation, ground transportation, protective details,
Hmm.
surveillance detection teams, intelligence analysts, it can get huge,
The
and
beast.
there's often no need for it. So
Uh,
the conversation I've had with executives is, well, let's start by really honestly having a discussion about what the real threat is and what are
mhm.
our threats. What does your own data tell you? Do you even have data? And
Right.
start on a real kind of realistic thing, because right now, well, it's died down some, but a lot of people have been making decisions basically out of fear,
Hmm.
and that's not unusual. The man was shot
Right.
in the back. I would
Right.
expect them to be afraid.
Right.
But I have to say that some of the decisions, you know, in a year or two, they might back away from that level of investment.
Hmm.
So if you
Right.
properly size the organization, you properly size what we're doing and how, then it's going to have more of a long term benefit. There's another element I'll touch on with executive protection, which is a lot of times what's not thought about is that the families are part of that executive protection. So you need to keep
Hmm.
that in mind, and
Hmm.
that a lot of times those factors are pretty pretty important. And the final piece I'll say is the impact on the protectee's life is pretty big.
Hmm.
If you're an executive, you want to have a real life. You want to be able to go fishing with your family. You want to have vacations, and you don't want to be constantly being guarded by, you know, a
Right.
6'2", 185-pound guy who looks like he could be playing for a college football team.
Hmm.
You know, it's intrusive.
Right. And it's not
So
normal.
no, it's not. It is not, and it is not low profile. And most of these folks want to stay low profile.
Right. Right. And so I see that with a lot of these executives, because they don't know, they're in their world. And because executive protection, global security is your world, you see it very differently. So I do see how you have to train the executives, coach them, and let them know what the expectations are, because they don't know. Because then if you don't coach them, then they not only become a liability to themselves, but a liability to everyone else on the team as well.
There is a discussion in a professional, almost consultative way that you address this with the executives. And you have to ask the questions to get them to think, and you also have to give them time to process the information so that they can absorb it. It's not a lecture, it's a discussion about expectations, requirements, and risks. Executives understand risk, okay? And different executives have different levels of appetite, and different boards of directors have different levels of appetite for risk. And so there is almost a diplomatic approach you have to take in order to get through to them to say, here is the realistic expectation and the realistic cost associated with, and the realistic impact on the life of the person being protected. Because the element that needs to be remembered here is the person being protected has the right, generally speaking, to reject that protection. And oh, by the way, if you try and force something on somebody when they don't want it, they're just going to find ways to get around it.
Yeah, they become more resistant.
It is, again, going back to the Aikido discussion we just had a minute ago, there's a blending that occurs here that needs to occur in order to get to that point.
Right. Excellent. So let me ask you, and I know we talked about some of the global threat issues. What are some of the biggest issues as it relates to the everyday security company that hires armed, unarmed, uniformed security officers? I like to call them security professionals.
Well,
from a leadership perspective.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because the security officer or security guard is the most, in many ways, neglected or overlooked. And yet they are also the single most likely and visible element of your security program. So let's tear this apart. Most organizations that employ security guards employ one of two types: proprietary, hired in-house, or contractors. The majority of the world probably relies on contractors. In-house is a little more expensive, and a lot of companies try to keep that cost down because this is a cost center. They don't want to spend more money.
Right. There's more of a liability as well.
Exactly. But this is the face of your security organization. And believe it or not, operational budgets, generally speaking, you spend about 70% of your operational budget on guard force. So if you have a budget of $10 million, it's not unusual for $7 million of that to be spent on guards. Okay, that's a lot of money on guards, but that's the truth. And yet, people look at them and treat them. They think of them kind of the way you would a door. You expect it to open. Okay, and so it's important to understand. This is an area where if you get it wrong, it sends the message about your security program. This is an area where if you get it wrong, everybody remembers what the guard did. They don't remember all the brilliant programs, policies, and procedures you have. So to do that, there are three fundamentals you need to address. The first one you need to address is whether it's in-house or you outsource it from a contractor, the hiring process. You can make a diamond out of coal, but you're going to put a lot of energy in it to turn it into a diamond. You need to really dig into that hiring process, not only whether it's internal or external, and make sure you're getting the right material. You don't always have to have the best people be security officers. You need people who are going to show up and follow instructions. The second element is the training of the guard. Different states and different countries have different requirements, but you need to have a minimum standard of what you expect your guards to do that follows the post orders. You know, as the saying goes, policies tell people what we do and why. Procedures tell you how to do it. If that's not all developed, all of that needs to be produced and developed and prepared, turned into training materials, which is then used to train your guards. You need them to do what it is you want done, not what everybody else is doing, because each business is a little different. And the third area, which is critical to this, which ties in with the training, in my opinion, is the supervision. In most cases, guard forces are supervised by people who are the best guard, which means the person who shows up on time and is not late and doesn't call off. That doesn't mean they're the best leader. And you need to have good leadership. I will remind everybody that if you don't get this right, it can really hurt you. You may recall a few years ago at the Champlain Towers in southern Florida, they had those towers that collapsed. That produced the largest lawsuit against a guard company in history, $500 million with a B dollars paid out. And the reason for it was because they did not train the guard that if something happens, he should push one button. Had he pushed that button, an alert would have been sent to the whole building telling people to get out of the building. Now, would it have saved their lives? We don't know. But we do know because they weren't trained, they got hit with a $500 million lawsuit and loss. It's just, and we're talking about a person who's just a normal security guard.
Right.
Not anybody that you wouldn't see anywhere else. But that lack of training had a huge impact on cost and lives.
Right. Right. And we just expect when the security officer doesn't do their job, we believe that they're at fault, but we don't look at how we contributed to that. And a lot of that stems from training. You hit the nail on the head with that. Training. If they haven't been trained, they don't know what to do. And even if they have been trained at one location, if they go to another location, have they been trained there as well? Do they know what
That's
to do
correct.
there? Right? The SOPs, standard operating procedures, vary from post to post,
Absolutely.
location to location, client to client. So again, we always tend to point the finger, but we don't learn from those mistakes, and we're not proactive in setting up some principles and guidelines to make sure it doesn't ever happen. So using a little bit of strategic foresight before it actually happens, coming up, being proactive, looking at a situation, saying, hey, God forbid, 2, 3 years, 5 years from now, if this were to happen, what can we do to prevent it? And then you brainstorm and come up with these ideas. And it always ties back to two things that I
I
see:
agree.
training and leadership.
Yeah, so let's talk about leadership for a minute. I come up from the school that said leadership is the process of influencing others to accomplish a task by providing purpose, direction, and motivation. And those three elements are the things that any leadership program should have. Why are you doing this? How do I get you to do this? And what direction do we need to go to do this? You do not have to have a master's degree in organizational development to understand those three fundamentals. Many great leaders just know it in their bones, but it is something that can be learned if you're willing to study it. Understanding where people are, purpose. Why are we doing this? If we were to, when applied to our security guard model, security guards want to do the right thing. If you line them up, you typically will find 7 out of 10 are going to want to do the right thing. The other 3 you may have to address to help motivate them, and there'll always be one that you're probably going to have to say, I'm sorry, this isn't going to work out, right? But if they're properly taught and properly led, their motivations go up very quickly. People will stay and work in environments if they feel like they're doing something useful and working for people who appreciate them. And I can't think of a more unappreciated group of people than security guards.
Right.
Just not really treated with any respect at all until something goes wrong. And then if they do the good thing, oh, wow, you were a hero. But if they don't, then they blame them.
Right.
Were they trained? Now, by understanding there is accountability here, if you've been properly trained, led, and shown what to do and you don't do it, you are accountable as an individual. But I think in many cases, I think you hit the nail on the head there. They really haven't been well led or well trained on what they expected to do. And it needs to be tailored in some capacity based on the site. The location and time that they're performing their duties is very specific, and that's important. It's different working at a place between 2 in the afternoon and 2 in the morning.
You said something that resonated deeply. A lot of security professionals, they're not treated well. And I've done a study, and I've seen thousands of security professionals all over the world. And there's one constant. And when we look at the treatment is not always good. Now, the treatment is a little better when you have security professionals who actually work specifically for the organizations because they're hired directly by the organization, but the rules are different anyway. The licensing, everything is just different. So they're part of that family, if you will. But if you're a contractor, like you said, most security professionals, they are brought in to provide a service. So they're contracted. And so they're not really embraced as much by the client. I have seen that a lot. And they're treated and actually told to do things beyond the scope of their duties as well.
I'd like to speak to what we did in my current organization. This is, as with any organization, it's about people. People means relationships. So the way I approached this when I took over at AIDS Healthcare Foundation, because I was actually the first one they hired to be a security director. They didn't have they have a security program before I came here. Was to focus on, okay, let's first start with the basics. What is this organization? Who are they? And how do they work? So I employed, if you're familiar with the book by Michael Watkins, The First 90 Days, it's kind of become a bit of a classic. I used that book as my guide, and I had developed a program to understand my organization. In the process of understanding and learning from those around me how and what and why they did and where they did it, I built credibility because I spent more time listening than talking, which is really important. Once I understood my organization, then I also understood who I need to speak with and at what level I need to speak to. And I was fortunate to receive pretty good support from senior management, or which you would refer to as a C-suite. And I have enjoyed the support from the CEO. In fact, I typically meet with him once a month. Sometimes I'm talking to him, 2, 3, 4 times in a month. Sometimes 2, 3, 4 times in a week. It just depends on what the situation. But I've enjoyed a really good relationship with him and the ability to have influence. If security is seen at the right level, that it is a business solution provider, then the esteem it's held within the organization goes higher. At AIDS Healthcare Foundation, we operate in some pretty tough areas. On average, an area is about four, almost 5 times the national average for crime. And internationally, we're in places like Ukraine, Myanmar, Haiti, active conflict zones, really, including Mexico, if you want to get down to it, could be considered an active conflict zone, depending on your definition. That meant there were real people at risk and real concerns. And so by building those relationships, I was able to influence the decision making and say, here's what we probably should or should not be doing. Right. But as an advisor, which is what we are, security advisors, we need to keep in mind, we're not the decision makers. There's an executive team that has to make the decision. We are part of the calculus of information that comes in that they have to make a decision based on what they know. So it's important for us to keep our roles in perspective. We are there to give them the best advice we can and tell them, here are your options, here are the risks, here are the possibilities, the impact of those risks, here are some solutions to mitigate that risk. By being really, really focused on providing solutions, you raise the level and the esteem that security is held within an organization. This takes one other element: time and patience. Rome is not built in a day. You must work at it. And it's a daily grind of really trying to be consistent about what your performance. The more consistent you are, the more likely you are to be held in higher esteem.
Right. And one of the things that you said is very true too, because in the security industry, you have high attrition, high turnover.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And the reason I see the high attrition rates is based on some of the treatment that they face.
I agree. I think it's an accurate statement.
So then, in your experience, what are the key leadership traits that make an effective security manager or executive?
Good question. I would say listening, number one. Not only for what's said, but what's not said. I think that's very, 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 very important. Number two, be detail oriented. I tell this to my team all the time: details kill. Okay? Details are what gets you. The grand concepts and operational things that we like to do, those are great. It's always the details that undermine. You have to pay attention to the details. What's being said, who's saying it, how they're saying it, what is it we're going to do here? You cannot ignore details. The more detailed you are in your understanding of the operation, the easier it is for you to place what you're doing in context for the leadership, to raise it in esteem. And the third thing is delivery. In the end, all businesses, all organizations for that matter, they're going to look at the results. If you promise you will deliver X and you deliver X minus 4, you did not deliver X. You have to focus on delivery. If you say you're going to come up with a solution, we will have an access control system installed by, September 30th, whatever. It doesn't matter really. And you come in October 12th, you have missed your objective. Mm-hmm. And the final element is communication. You have to be communicating a great deal because it's a unique field. And you don't want to bury them with noise, but you want to give them communication about those things that are important to them and keep them updated on what the expectations were and where they should be seeing results, milestones, however you want to do it, project manage, doesn't matter. What matters is, am I communicating to the key leaders the information they need to know about what's going on when they need it? And if there's a problem, am I communicating this quick enough? Bad news does not get better with age. It just ferments. It gets worse.
Right.
Okay. So, the more you communicate, the more you can help manage those expectations.
Right. Exactly. All right. So, how can global security leaders, then, such as yourself, balance operational demands with developing and mentoring the next generation of global security professionals?
Well, I believe that you don't you won't succeed if you're not developing your next level of leadership. You will not achieve your goals if you're not showing them how to do this.
Hmm.
They need whoever's your direct reports people are always looking to advance themselves, and they want those individuals that are going to help. They feel like are going to help advance themselves in their careers. Now, setting high standards is important. Attention to detail is very important. These are things you want your team to have as a habit, but you also have to be seen as the individual who helps them achieve their goals. So start again with listening. What is it they want to do, and where do they want to go? Yeah, the classic question you're asked during an interview: where do you see yourself in 5 years? It's not a bad question, but my questions typically starts with, okay, what's your career goal?
Hmm.
What do you want to do? Tell me. Because if your career goal is only 5 years, you're probably missing the mark. Career goals need to be thinking of in terms of decades, not half a decade. But make sure they understand, or they tell you they can articulate what it is their career goals are, and then find the solution that helps them get there. It's my belief that if I have a direct report that stays with me for more than 3 years, I'm happy.
Hmm.
Somewhere at 5 years, they're probably going to be looking to go somewhere else.
Hmm.
It's not a field where there's a lot of upward mobility. If you want to move up, you typically have to leave. I believe us as leaders should be training the folks and knowing that at some point they're going to leave. But when they do, you want them to go to another location where they are their own head of security, or they're moved up in the organization where they grow
Absolutely.
career wise. You don't want to have them go from the job they're in now to a lateral job right where they were. That's not what mentors are after, in my opinion. It's their
Right.
decision, but I always say you want to make sure you train people to be able to replace you, not so that you'll be fired, so they can take over and continue and carry it even more, carry the ball further down the field.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I definitely agree with that because the development of leadership to me is the benchmark or even the hallmark of leadership. Jim Collins in his book Good to Great talks about the level 5 leader. Is the level
Mm-hmm.
5 leader is not only developing, mentoring, and creating that leadership culture, but when they leave the organization for whatever reason, the culture continues. That leadership culture that was created by that leader who no longer is a part of that organization still exists to that very day. So I definitely agree with that.
For
Let me
sure.
ask you the next question then.
Mm-hmm.
So what role does emotional intelligence play in leading diverse security teams in high pressure threat or high pressure security environments?
It helps, but in a high pressure situation, you kind of need to be able to neutralize emotions. If you are talking, let's be clear about what high pressure is. So high pressure to me is operating in the Ukraine or in Haiti or dealing
Mm-hmm.
with an active conflict situation or active shooter. You have to switch some of that stuff off in the critical phase of a crisis. You have to deal with the facts in front of you. You have to be very, very clinical. That doesn't mean you're not empathetic. It means you're trying to get to a solution where empathy will be a little easier. Being
Right.
empathetic in the middle of a crisis could distract you from dealing with the most pressing thing, which is saving life. Okay. So Where emotional empathy comes in more than anything else is as you are, if you're a leader, you're already in front of these things. You want to be, as the saying, left of boom, right of boom, right? You're to the left of boom. You don't want to be responding after the boom. You want to be preparing for it beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
If you have prepared properly when boom hits or if it hits, it allows you a little more leeway to be a little more sympathetic and empathetic to people and be more emotionally connected. But in that acute phase, you're going to have to be very cautious of that. You can't spend as much time because every moment you take, you may be delaying a decision or an action that can save somebody's life. Emotional intelligence, however, is really important prior to and after that critical phase, especially afterwards. Somebody who's been through a traumatic event is going to have blowback, you know, residual impact for some time. And they may not even be aware of that. And so I always try to tell people when I'm talking to them, you watch out for if you have the following things happen, because it probably indicates you might have a problem you don't know about after an event. And it's up to your teammates to keep an eye on that, and it's up to leaders to encourage people to keep an eye on that. If you see somebody who's never late, all of a sudden showing up late after a traumatic event, you might want to take a look at that. Have a conversation. For the love of God, just talk to them and listen to them. A lot of times, it's just the simple process of talking to somebody is the way to solve the problem.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot because a lot of times you have managers who would actually see the person who is never late. All of a sudden, the person's coming late, and instead of trying to, like you said, listen and having a conversation with them, you automatically go to our default and like, hey, you're gonna have to pick it up. You know, you're kind of slacking here instead of
Mm-hmm.
figuring out how we can avail ourselves and serve them and be empathetic to them as well. So I appreciate that. You're absolutely correct.
Post traumatic event in particular. I mean, I don't want to get into diagnosing PTSD, but post
Hmm.
event when people don't realize that they're having more of a reaction they thought they did.
Right.
Um, yeah, I can remember one young man who had a pretty tough encounter where somebody passed away, and I spoke with him personally. I said, "Look, this is what you need to watch out for." He was never late before, and then all of a sudden he started having problems, and it took a while for him to realize, no, you're more effective than you think you are.
Right. Right. So that leads me to another question then. What are the biggest challenges when managing security across international locations and cultures, and how can leaders navigate them?
Well, some of the single biggest challenges is understanding the impact of local laws, local international laws on your operations because they are very diverse.
Mm.
Um, you really have to do some sort of cultural studies. Now, that's not hard to do. There's lots of information out there. If you're a U.S. company and you're operating overseas, you certainly have the Overseas Security Advisory Council that you can join, and they will help you understand what the local laws are. Customs are a little different. My personal belief is it's always better to hire people from a country to work than to bring in expatriates or people from another country. Americans flying into, Peru to work won't be as good as Peruvians working there who you show, here are some industry best practices, you train them up and then they go out and do the work. We've had a lot of success with that at the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. We don't bring in expatriates. But to understand the laws and the cultures can be really tough, and it requires patience. And you have to ask a lot of obvious questions. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a colleague about Kenya, and we were talking about misdemeanor versus felony. I said, out of curiosity, I said, so how long will they put you in jail if you're convicted of a misdemeanor? I think he said 3 years. And I believe my reaction was quite a surprise to him. I said, man, in the United States, a misdemeanor, you don't go to jail for more than 1 year.
Hmm.
But they don't consider that. They consider 3 years to be a misdemeanor. That's a pretty
Wow.
big legal difference. Okay.
Mhm.
And understanding those requirements are very different. The idea, another of my favorite example is, you don't have to say anything. In the United States, you don't have to give evidence against yourself. That's not
Right.
true in the rest of the world.
Hmm.
If police ask you a question and you don't answer, you're going to be held accountable for not answering. And if you lie to
Hmm.
them, it gets even worse.
Right.
So understanding the laws are important.
Yeah.
Another example, a lot of countries, particularly in Europe, especially East Europe, have very strict privacy requirements. They spent, in the example of East Germany, they spent from 1933 until 1990, they were either under the Nazis or under the communist dictatorship. Once that ended, they had some very strong ideas about privacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are restrictions on what security can do in order to meet those requirements. You have to accept those things. You can't change them and work within them.
Yeah. So then that's very interesting because that leads me to another question. I'm building on questions and I'm listening because it's a very interesting discussion and I really appreciate it. What metrics or indicators should security leaders use to measure the effectiveness of their security programs?
The metrics need to be based off of the organization's goals, cultures, policies, and procedures. Now, those are going to vary. If you are in a manufacturing environment, you have a different set of metrics than you have if you are in a research and development facility. And security needs to be adapted to the very specific needs of the business and the business type in order to be effective. I like to think, when I think of metrics, key performance indicators, I always go back to that classic, acronym of SMART. They need to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. You can't get away from that. I don't know, it doesn't really matter which business you're in. If you design your metrics around, is it specific enough? Can we measure this? Okay. Is it something that we can achieve? I mean, setting a goal of, for example, eliminating all theft in an organization. Yeah. Okay. Maybe that's a good goal, ideally, but let's face it, if you're working in convenience stores, you're probably not going to eliminate all theft. And the cost of eliminating all theft might exceed the loss of the items that you're dealing with. So may not be achievable or even smart for that matter. It needs to be relevant to the business. I can create some great security metrics, but if they're not relevant to what the business leaders want, they're useless. And they need to be measured in some type of time. When do we want to achieve this goal? I think if you focus on those fundamentals, it's going to vary what kind of business you're in. I've worked in high tech. I've worked in nonprofits. You have to really adapt to where the leaders want to go. If you are not as a leader in the industry seen as providing solutions relevant to their business, they're not going to listen to you.
Mm-hmm. Wow. That was great. Great response. And I just want to shift the conversation just a little bit, if you don't mind, because a lot of individuals are in the security industry. Some of them may want to try to get their CPP designation. Some of the people listening to this episode probably don't know what a CPP is. So talk to us a little bit about CPP, what it stands for, how and why should you achieve it, and share about your journey in attaining your CPP designation.
It's an interesting question. All right. So I got my CPP designation back in, let's say early in the 21st century. We'll leave it there. All right. So what is it? Certified Protection Professional was the first of the major certifications that the American Society for Industrial Security created. And this is a broad view of some 7 or 8 subjects in which you are certified in security management, security, business operations, crisis management, guard force management, investigations, etc. The advantage of it is that first of all, it's not an easy test. If I recall correctly, it's 244 questions. You have 4 hours, 200 of which are actually graded. It's a tough test. You study, most of us work in the industry for at least 5 years and then study for a certain period of time before you even try and take that test. I got my CPP quite some years ago and I was quite happy to have it. And then I came to work for an organization that did not support CPP, so I lost the certification. I finally got around to an organization that supported it again. I had to do the recertification. So I've had the benefit of doing it twice.
Couldn't imagine that.
Yeah, not something I recommend. It's a lot of effort. The beauty of doing it twice is that when I came back and took it basically 20 years later, so much had changed that I learned a great deal. And it's a very valuable way of demonstrating your knowledge of your profession. Being actually technically competent can be documented using the CPP. The other reason for it, from an organizational perspective, the CPP is Safety Act certified. So if you're familiar with the Safety Act, which came out of 9/11, its intention was to address the issues regarding liability with regard to terrorism. Well, if you work in an organization like I do, where you're kind of out there politically, the Safety Act is a good thing, because if you have leaders who are CPP certified, and God forbid, for example, we have the hate group attack because we have so many people who support LGBTQ causes, or we're in a country where terrorism hits one of our clinics, right? The Safety Act certification allows us to say as a positive defense in civil liability cases. So from a business perspective, it does reduce the risk by being a CPP. Do I encourage people to get a CPP? Absolutely. In fact, everybody that's reporting to me is either getting that or the Associated Protection Professional. I basically set that as the standard. I view it as basic. I think it's table stakes. I think if you're going to be a professional in an organization, if you're a fraud investigator, you should be a certified fraud examiner, right?
Right.
If you're a security management professional, I believe you should be a CPP, because by doing so, you show a level of competence above and beyond just the average. And it does help in the professionalization of what we do.
Right. It's like the gold star
It
of
is.
security. It's like the top tier. Right.
When I was in the U.S. Army in the infantry, the big thing to do was I wasn't an infantry officer, I was an armor officer, but I consider it the way the infantry officers considered the Ranger tab. You went to Ranger school to get the Ranger tab. Ranger school, anyone who's been through it will tell you it's pretty brutal. It's not for the faint of heart, okay? And you could tell the difference and the way they treated each other, those who had the Ranger tab and who didn't have the Ranger tab on their collar. And so I think of the CPP kind of the same way. Those who have it, you can tell, and they're typically telling their performance, the difference between those who have it and those who don't.
Right. Right. Excellent. Excellent. I like that. So what advice do you have for aspiring security professionals who want to step into leadership or senior leadership roles, I should say, within the security industry?
Well, be technically and tactically competent in what you do. Know your industry and know what the standards are and what are industry standards. In the first phase of your career, you should be focusing on learning industry standards and knowing what they are. They will not evenly be applied. What is applied is based on business requirements, and some businesses just don't want to apply those standards. But you need to know what they are, and you need to be able to articulate the reasons behind them. That's the first thing. The second thing is joining organizations and associations that will allow you to connect with other people who are leaders in your field. Certainly, ASIS is a good one. If you can get into it, they have the Chief Security Officer, CSO Center, Chief Security Officer, Center for Leadership and Excellence. It's a subgroup. You have to be sponsored to get in, but it's a very good group for those who want to become executives. They have an ability to accept called deputy CSOs in there, and I would encourage people who are interested to just look into it. It's a good way when you get to that right level to be able to learn enough to become an executive. The third thing that you want to do is to be a lifelong learner. Mm-hmm. This business changes. It's changed a lot over the years and will continue to change. If you are not learning something new every quarter at least, you're probably going to fall behind. And you won't know it until it's too late. So learning all the time is really, really important. Finding a good mentor is a help. You need to look for them, try to find them, but that's not always easy to do. But finding a good mentor is particularly important.
Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent advice, because there are a lot of people, there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of people within the security industry as a whole who actually enjoy working in the security industry. Mm-hmm. So it is important, because the security industry is in fact a professional industry. Mm-hmm. And I do applaud, because ACES is like the gold standard in security, and they pretty much set the benchmark as to the professionalism as far as it is concerned in terms of security. So it is they professionalize the security industry as it needs to be. Just like a
I
lot of
agree.
states around the country in the United States of America, they professionalize the security industry in terms of making sure that you're licensed and credentialed, which is also
Yes.
important. And when I look at the CPP test, basically, I would say it's kind of like the bar exam for attorneys, if you will, in terms of studying and then taking the test, because it's pretty a daunting experience. Is the point that I'm making? Not saying it's the
Hmm.
same, but it's just pretty daunting because I looked at the CPP test as well, and I was looking into the CPP designation over 10 some odd years ago. But my career, my life took a whole different
Right.
turn. So I really didn't focus on that because I was mostly working for, the government organizations and not really in the private sector, although I
Hmm.
have worked in the private sector for some time as well. So yeah, having that credential will, I think, and even if you don't use it to market yourself, having it because of the information and the training, I think still goes a long way. Because you talked about being part of those associations and then having those subscriptions to trade and journal magazines and going to those training seminars, whether it's virtual or
Yes, I agree.
traveling to them,
Hmm.
that's also important because you got to constantly learn. You got to stay on the trends, especially if you're going to be a professional in this industry. Definitely if you choose to be a leader in this industry as well.
I strongly believe in it.
Mhm.
I I can't say it enough. It did change the trajectory of my career. After I got that, things changed very quickly. And I would encourage anyone who's serious about being a security professional to really look into it.
Yeah.
It will not be easy. You will have to study, but you don't have a. It's not hard or it's hard. Excuse me, let me restate it this way. It is tougher to make a business case for something when you don't know your business,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And the CPP allows you to really know. And when you don't know, it also shows you this is where you go to find it out. And that's important because knowledge and information is changing constantly. But you have to be dedicated to learning in order to be effective in this industry and prove the CPP, in my opinion, proves it.
I really enjoyed this discussion today. I really learned a lot about the
Thanks. No,
security industry. You're definitely benefiting a lot of people who are going to listen to this episode. So let me ask you, what's one nugget above all else you would like to leave our guests with today?
don't give up. Determination, in my opinion, or perseverance is the secret sauce to success. In martial arts, we have a saying, it's a Japanese saying, you get knocked down 7 times, you get up 8. You're going to get knocked down. Things are going to go wrong. You can't change that. You're going to get it wrong. You're going to make mistakes. Not the mistake that's the killer. It's the giving up.
Hmm.
It's not trying. It's not learning. So if anyone asks me how to be successful, the most key element to success overall, I'm going to say it's perseverance.
Hmm.
You just keep going. You get knocked down, okay? Why did I get knocked down? What happened? What worked? What didn't? What did I know? What didn't I know? What are my lessons? All right, let's try it again. And you keep going on, and eventually, you're going to be successful. I'm reminded actually right now of that movie, The Martian, right?
Hmm.
Matt Damon, and at the end of it, he asked, did you ever think you were going to die up there?" He said, "Yes, absolutely. This is space. It does not cooperate." He said, "One day you look up and this is it. This is how I end. It's all over. Now you can either sit there or you start working it. You do the math. You solve one problem, and then you solve another problem, and then you solve another problem. And if you solve enough problems, you get to go home." And that, in my opinion, encapsulates perseverance. Just keep at it. Okay. Eventually, even with just average intelligence, you're going to get to the solution you need to get to be successful. But if you give up, it doesn't matter.
Right. Wow. That was excellent. That was awesome.
Good
So how
job.
can people connect with you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn for those who are interested. My LinkedIn profiles, I try to keep it active. That's probably the easiest way to reach out to me if somebody wants to contact me. Um, I try to respond, but to be candid, we are all pretty busy, and so sometimes it's a little tougher than others. But that's probably the easiest way to reach out to me is just send me a note in LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to I'll try to connect with people and help them.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Thank you again, RC, for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us today about leading in the private security industry.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you. I enjoyed doing this.
Well, it's been my pleasure speaking with you, and it's been truly my honor. And I thank you once again. Thank you so much for that.
Certainly.
To our listeners, don't forget to like and subscribe to this podcast and tune in every Thursday for fresh content. For more information about this podcast, books, workshops, and training programs, be sure to visit my website at www.drhspeaks.com. That's drhspeaks.com. I also want to take this opportunity to thank you for your support in making this podcast possible. It is always a pleasure having you as part of the family. Until the next time, be well, God bless, and lead on.